11. Should we start this lecture? Hello and welcome to this webinar on detection and prevention of money mule accounts hosted by Fintelekt and the Asian Bankers Association. I'm Arpita Bedekar representing Fintelekt. I'm joined by 4 very experienced panelists, and I feel honored to have them here to share their views on this very pressing topic, a global concern for governments and financial institutions alike. And no better evidence on the importance of this topic than the fact that we have a record turnout, close to 1,700 participants registered from across 58 countries. So a very warm welcome to all the participants today. Let me introduce our panelists to you very briefly. In the interest of time, we are going to add links to their LinkedIn profiles in the chat box so you can get to know more about them. So let me start with Julia Chin. She's the head of compliance at HugoSave Singapore. She's also part of the Global Coalition to Fight Financial Crime. And she's really passionate about compliance, fintech, financial inclusion, and she's also a trainer with Fintelekt. So Julia, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
We also have Pat Lorden, who was until recently the head of the Garda National Economic Crime Bureau and the head of the Irish Financial Intelligence Unit. He was also Detective Chief Superintendent in charge of the Garda National Cybercrime Bureau until 2020. Pat is joining us from Ireland at a really early hour. Pat, welcome and good morning.
Good morning from Ireland. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate. I'm really looking forward to this morning's webinar.
Let me also introduce Torsten Kleiner-Boening, Chief Risk and Compliance Officer of ABA Bank, based in Cambodia. He has lived and worked across the world. He has varied experience, and I'm sure you will enjoy hearing from him today. Torsten, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. And I think it's a very acute topic, clearly visible in the numbers.
Yes. Last but not the least, we have Hari Parker, VP Program Management and Client Delivery of M2P, based in India. Hari comes from a banking background and now represents the very vibrant and fast-growing fintech industry in India. Hari, welcome to the webinar.
Hey, thanks, Arpita. Greetings all. Thank you for providing me an opportunity to join the session.
As you can all see, we have the opportunity to hear on this topic from the compliance community as well as from the law enforcement side. So we'll have this discussion going for about 50 minutes and then leave the last 10 minutes to take questions from the audience. So participants, please enter your questions in the Q&A box as we go along. We are also live streaming on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, please enter your questions in the comments section. And we'll try and pick up your questions from there as well. Before we begin, let me just make a few quick announcements. First, we will be providing participation certificates to all the attendees. If you're on YouTube, you can simply email us on support@fintelekt.com and request for your certificate. I think we've put the email ID in the chat box as well. And secondly, let me tell you about the Asian Bankers Association's 39th ABA General Meeting and Conference, which is coming up on November 9th and 10th, 2023 in Kathmandu, Nepal. This conference has the theme Asian Banking Roadmap for Recovery and Sustained Growth. And it will be an excellent opportunity to network, to learn from the many invited experts, government officials, regulators, and high-level bankers. They're going to cover topics like global market trends shaping the future of banking, digital transformation and adoption of AI, ESG banking strategy. There will also be a CEO forum. And of course, you'll have the opportunity of visiting the beautiful country of Nepal. For more information, we've also put a link in the chat box, and you can look it up for the agenda and details of the conference. So with that, let's begin. We know money mules are being associated with all types of frauds, scams, money laundering involving global criminal networks. I'd like to pose the first question to Torsten. You work in Cambodia's biggest bank. What do you see as the emerging trends or new tactics that criminals are using to recruit and use money mules, especially in this instant payment environment? Torsten.
Yeah, I think the provision of digital accounts and digital account opening, as some call instant accounts or e-accounts, they make the life for money mules and organized crime behind to some degree easier. Cases that we have seen, for example, here in Cambodia, but the same in Thailand or in Laos or in Vietnam from partner banks, is that criminal organizations bring people to the to open an instant account, totally legitimate, with all proper documents and everything, and then to hand over the phone, the SIM card, and everything to a criminal organization in the back. So the money mule, like the old school that would have come to the branch that you would have seen personally, nowadays disappears in this region here. You really have people who act as a money mule by handing over their account in detail. And especially when you work in countries with low income, a monthly payment of $50 for hosting your account to a criminal organization is tempting. And that is a challenge because $50, teasing.
Right. Thank you so much. Julia, would you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I'd like to add to the point that Thorsten has just mentioned as well, is that we have noticed that people were, or rather I believe their bad hats have been advertising on Telegram as well, inviting people to sell their credentials, your national ID credentials, as well as, for example, a specific bank account that they can use. They will offer money. So this is something that we have seen in some of the Telegram groups and something to be made aware of. And like Thorsten also mentioned, in a country where they're generally low income, this is something really, really tempting.
Right, clearly. Thank you. Pat, if I may bring you in, from the perspective of law enforcement agencies, what are the challenges involved, especially when there's so many transnational networks and they span across countries?
Yes, listening to the two speakers, it's probably no different in Europe. We've carried out a lot of work over the last 3 or 4 years on the organized crime groups globally. They have bases in most continents, in most countries. And what we have seen is exactly as has already been covered. There are mule herders in all of our jurisdictions, and they are the people that manage the collection of the mules, the registration of the mules, and the subsequent handling of their accounts. And these mule herders are paid by what we would call the managers and the directors of the organized crime groups. So it's no accident that they come to your bank, come to your e-accounts, opening the accounts. It's very well organized. We've also seen travel from other countries throughout Europe to Ireland to open accounts physically over the last number of years. This obviously is made easier with the new banking systems, the payment systems that we have, all of the e-money providers. So it's a challenge for all of the banks at the moment to identify these accounts very quickly to stop them becoming money mule accounts. So it's no real difference, Arpita, other than we're probably a little bit ahead of you in that we've seen this for the last 2 or 3 years where they're utilizing the e-money accounts very, very early on.
Okay, thank you.
If I may add to Pat, we have seen it coming in 2019, 2020 is when the wave came, when the first instant accounts were opened. And what we see is these fraudsters behind them, they become better. They give them different phone types. They give them different phone numbers. So they're not buying phone numbers en bloc so that you could see in one branch or in one location or in one batch, you have phone numbers incrementing, which was previously the thing when they bought like 10 SIM cards and handed them out. They're now better. They spread their information. And I think one of the elements that kind of where the wave now from a banking side comes to prevent this is biometrics. The early generation of instant accounts and e-money was very much based on OTP codes and passwords and these type of things. So once the mule had handed over his phone, there was no physical connection to the mule required. Now what we see is banks are starting here in the region in Asia to require face recognition when you do a transaction. So that means the mule needs to be there when he does when the transaction is done, which kind of makes the farming, especially without prejudice to any region here, but especially Laotian and Chinese groups, they have huge farms. And that will make it more difficult once face recognition and biometrics come into the play.
Got it. So, having said or rather said about the problem, how does an organization recognize money mule activity? So what are are there any typical warning signs or red flag indicators? And Hari, if I may start with you on this.
Yeah, sure, Arpita. So I have been working initially with the prepaid payment instrument operators, which are regulated entities under the RBI. So there was a trend seen where a simple due diligence or a minimum KYC account could be easily opened by a customer by just forwarding his email and mobile number, which was quite easy to access and operate. But there was a limitation of the amount of which he could transact or utilize, and hence number of these small or minimum KYC accounts were open to utilize these accounts as money mule accounts, and later suddenly they were blocked or closed later once it was identified. So as you mentioned about the RFIs, so what we could observe is that if there is a account where and there is a sudden surge in transactions or sudden the frequency increases, or if a regular customer starts transacting or doing international transactions or different geographies, which is not his usual behavior, or if the login to the account happens from various IPs or various different countries, that could be also a red flag indicator or observation point where the monitoring can be enhanced to check whether that is a legitimate transaction, or if the customer has provided incomplete details for his account, or if there are the frequency of transaction has suddenly increased beyond a point, or huge amounts are transacted, or withdrawals of cash also happens, then that could be a red flag indicator or a warning or alarming signal that whether this account is being utilized by someone else, or a money mule is case can be detected here. So these are some of the warning signals where we can see that the customer's account, or it could be intentional or unintentional. As at the beginning of the session, we said that if a customer is doing it willingly, knowing the hazards of being a money mule, or someone's account who is victimized, or is being masked and utilized as a money mule account. So these are the various signals where we can find that this could be a red flag indicator for money mules. Yeah.
Julia, what about you? Are there any others that you're seeing in Singapore?
I think money mule red flags, as we would call it, is quite common from the beginning of time, where you will see many to one and one to many. Many people come putting small amount into one account, and then from one account, immediately you see the money going out. That trend still remains. We have not seen anything particularly different from the traditional typologies, as you call them, to indicate that these are money mules, and it's quite common to see all this many to one and one to many within 10 minutes thereabout. That's most of the cases.
Right. Is it generally more common in new accounts, or are you seeing the trend across?
This is a very interesting question, and we have seen some that open their account and they remain dormant for a while, which we suspect they were on standby for potentially being used eventually. So very dormant, they open account, zero amount inside, and then all of a sudden you see like 3 months down the road, the account became really active. So but it's actually a mix. So I think the most important factor is to see the trend of many to one and one to many, and it passes through without doing anything else. And with e-wallet, you would normally have the debit card that goes with it, or they will be used for any other particular purposes. But instead of using the card, they would be making use of it to transfer money to a third party.
Right. Thank you. So what can the financial institution do? Are there any innovative approaches that you may have tried or heard about, which have been effective in detecting or preventing mule activity? I know, Torsten, you spoke about biometrics. Is there anything else that you're trying out in your organization?
Yeah, I mean, we try several things. The first is what Julia said, various rules and detection patterns on account to account transfers to see if an account was opened, then was silent, and then there's a burst of activity to get an alarm. The key thing there is what we have observed is there's no point in doing it overnight backwards. You have to do it real time. Your engines have to work literally live with the transactions, because if you see this today happening, tonight the engine runs and tomorrow the engine tells you it's too late, the account is gone by tomorrow. You never get the customer, you never get anything. So you need and it doesn't have to be commercial expensive software. I mean, I can tell internally here we run end-to-end things on Power BI and our own internally developed Python code. The thing is there, you need people who are curious and good in machine learning and writing analytics to build this thing. The second, what we do is you introduce more and more biometrics, and you bind the account to the biometrics. That starts with the account opening, where you have a liveness check, document versus face check, verification against government documentation centers. Like, for example, here in Cambodia, we are very privileged. We have access to the central government's databases to verify national IDs and identities. So that helps. The third is, again, biometrics, is to make biometrics a part of the transfer experience of the customer. If the customer only has, as I said before, to use a PIN code and a password, that's easily transferable and nobody will see. But if you randomly request the face to be shown for a transaction, and that driven on a risk-based algorithm, then you have a chance that the mule has to be there. The fourth step that we do is awareness, because see, here in Cambodia, a lot of the poor people who are falling victim to this, who sell their accounts, are not aware of the consequences. For them, it's a bank account, I get $50. They are not aware that if the crime is closed, it's them who go to jail because they have been part of the financial crime. And last but not least, here in Cambodia, banks differentiate between regular accounts and instant accounts. So the instant accounts or the e-accounts have restriction in how much you can transfer and how much you can do. And most banks prohibit the cross-border use. So what we see is the criminals and the mules, they are starting to build, let's say, 10, 20 mules in the front. Then they have a network of 5, 6, let's call them aggregation accounts in the back that aggregate the money. And then they send it to another bank in small shots. And then from there, it goes cross-border. Because the other bank doesn't see the mule activity in the front, for them, it's not a problem. And what we see is, and this makes this is a detection pattern, those accounts in the back, they look all very much legitimate, and they're mostly related to businesses who are suspicious by design, restaurants, hotels, property development, where nobody would be suspicious by design if you have a $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 transaction. And the other thing is, with the data that you have, like, for example, I can disclose my bank, we are running over 100 million transactions per month, well in excess of that. That gives you a lot of data for pattern detection. And that is the 5, 6 things, you can look in, but you need to be on your toes. I think that's the one,
Right. Pat, you've represented the FIU and the Crime Bureau. Have you seen or led any initiatives around countering money mules that you can share?
Yes, some really good comments from the last speaker, and I'm going to work backwards from those, Arpita. Training and awareness is vital. So about 5 years ago, we attended a campus watch meeting in the southern part of our country in Cork. And as a result of that, we've carried out a fraud awareness week every year since then. And within that week, we dedicate one of the days specifically to money mules. And about 3 or 4 other times during the year with our press office within the law enforcement agency, stroke FIU, we would carry out a number of money mule awareness days. And that is vital to teach the younger people, because we have young people as young as 14, 15, 16 years of age involved in this. So the minute we carry out an awareness day on money mules, we see a dramatic drop within the banking system. So that's vital. And we also involve our domestic banks and international banks in that area. So in 2017, which is now 6 years ago, we set up a public-private partnership with the Irish domestic banks. We would carry out a lot of work again with the banks directly at these meetings on money mules, and combining that through Operation Emma on an annual basis with Europol. We try and keep the awareness as high as possible. Now, separate to that, a very good point, I think, is the disruption and the need for real-time monitoring. So if you asked me in 2015 or 16 about the word disruption, it's not something that would have been top of my agenda. But we've realized over the last number of years that you can't catch all of these people, you can't stop all of them, but you can definitely disrupt them. And if you carry out real-time monitoring, you can disrupt them. The second thing we carry out in relation to the disruption within law enforcement is trying to identify the IBANs very quickly and circulate them to other FIUs throughout the globe. That works quite well. But the main thing we've done, and in particular, we've had great success with parts of Asia, and I will single out Singapore and Hong Kong and these areas, is recovery of victims' money. So in other words, the money is stolen in Ireland or Europe, the money is transferred to a Mule account in Asia, and trying to have a direct contact with law enforcement there is vital. So we've recovered many millions of euros over the last 5 or 6 years from Asia as a result of direct contact with law enforcement. That is a challenge, I think, for the banking world. We carry out what you call is money recall, callback. They really don't work. So I think in the banking world, there needs to be an access number, not an email, because nobody looks at emails at 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon if they're out playing golf. You need a number to be able to contact the opposite bank to try and stop this transaction. And I can give you a very quick example of 2 days after I retired, somebody lost €250,000. By having contacts in 2 banks, we recovered that money from the UK in a matter of 3 or 4 hours. That is vital. And I think that's a big challenge for the banking fraternity in general. The last thing I'll finish with, Arpita, in this area is risk assessments. You all carry out a risk assessment. So too do the criminals. So I've seen in the last 12 months a risk assessment carried out by the criminal gang, and one criminal gang member is saying to the other, I think we have too many accounts with that address in that block of apartments. Is it not too risky? So just take that away and think about it. They're thinking the same way as you are. And a few of the speakers earlier have said, they're becoming more intelligent as well. They're not silly. They don't want to lose Mule accounts because they're their vital lifeblood. They want to try and manage them to their best capability. So yeah, lots of work being done. Lots of work being done in your part of the world. I'm well aware of it from meetings I've had with FATF and Egmont and everybody else. But I think we really need to do real-time monitoring.
Sure. I think, Torsten, you had something to add.
Sorry, I think what Pat said makes a lot of sense. There's something, I know there's like a lot of banks here now and they wonder like, how does this work? 2 things for the banks to take home as a practical advice. If another bank calls you and says, block the accounts, the problem is usually that your banking law and everything says you can't, because only the curfew of your country, the central bank of your country, or the court can tell you. And a lot of banks hesitate to block accounts because they're afraid if they block the wrong account, they get trouble with the authorities. So it is critical for national banking associations, for national associations of lending organizations and payment service providers to have close contact to their authorities to establish regimes or platforms or ways so that this, what Pat was pointing out, can be done. So that you're not in an ambiguous state of, should I block, should I not block? Because we all know, internally, you get a request from another bank, block this money, quick, 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 quick. And your legal department goes, whoa, where's the court order? Or where's the letter from the central bank? So this is one of the things where you as banks and organizations need to go and talk to your banking associations or whatever organization you are in and get your authorities to create a framework with you where this can be done quick, because time is money. Every hour matters. The longer you wait, after 48 hours, forget it. Money is probably gone. And the other thing is, you need to talk to your authorities to create a spirit where once you report a case like this, the authorities understand that you as a bank or as a payment service provider are not the faulty person. Because a lot of banks hesitate to report and to act and to tell because they're afraid that the central bank inspections will come and blame them for this. So this is something where the banking sector needs to work with the authorities to create an atmosphere and a setup where A, blocking can happen, and B, things can be discussed without having immediately the, as we say in my home country, Germany, the Black Peter pocket, you know, you're the one who's blamed for it happened.
Right. Thank you. Julia, coming to this point on, regulatory hurdles, what is your experience and anything that the Singapore MAS or government is doing to ensure that there's quick action on any accounts that are detected?
Well, on the regulatory side, we do receive all these production orders from the authorities or the law enforcement for us to provide the information. And when we see that, typically what we'll do is we'll block the account. There are also situations where we see funds going or coming from a specific bank that right now, something that I am also hoping to get involved in is, to have a community where we can have this discussion on if we come across such a situation, who do we reach out to? So far there is none. And I believe it's not unique to Singapore where, we don't know who to call. The other thing that I thought was quite interesting is that in this world of social media, the challenge of having our customers' account being blocked is that they go and complain on social media. So one area to be very careful about is that we have our community managers and our marketing team being very aware and always on the lookout for any potential complaints that come onto the social media that might be related to some of the people that we have blocked for suspicious transactions. That's one area. And I thought that I also add on the point that Thorsten and Pat mentioned. Thorsten mentioned about using Python dashboard. I've done that as well in the past. But of course, as volume increases, is when we will have got to definitely look at a more robust system. And Thorsten also mentioned about curiosity and training, and this is something that is so important because just based on the system alone, we will not be able to identify or even do a more robust kind of risk analysis. And of course, Pat also emphasizes on training as well. So I'll leave you with that.
Sure, thank you. I picked out one more point, which is around training and awareness, and I'm going to come to Hari, especially fintech, young customers. What are financial institutions doing to educate the customers about the dangers of becoming money mules and possible consequences of their actions? Hari?
Yeah, sure, Arpita. So as rightly mentioned earlier by Torsten and Julia also, that lot of training, awareness, and Pat also emphasized on the same that, we need to conduct a lot of interactive sessions because many of the money mules are young, students or young adults who are maybe not aware of the consequences, that there could be prosecution involved or there's a reputation damage, or, this accounts can further impact their financial credibility, etc. So a lot of interactive sessions, education, awareness, training. So financial institutions in India, there's a lot of trend to catch the young students for having prepaid cards. So there's a lot of training required. Even the apex regulator RBI has come up with certain interactive videos or small clippings which shows how your account could be misused, or don't share your OTPs, or different channels, social media channels through which that awareness is getting created, so that they are aware that someone might try to misuse, and this could be illicit funds or could be for any other terrorism activities or stuff like that. So creating that education awareness training through different interactive sessions and through different organizations plays a critical role in creating to know the consequences of this money mule hazards.
Sure. Torsten, how has it been in Cambodia? Anything different that you're doing?
I mean, it's basically the same as what Harry said. There's only one hurdle. In a lot of South and East Asian countries, banks are shy to go out and do marketing and do publications on topics like fraud, scam, money mules, because there's immediately, like what Julia said, immediately social media upheaval. And there's always the fear that if you go first and you present something about this, the people may attribute you with that, and it can create a stigma. But I see this is getting kind of like we're getting over that hurdle. And like we, for example, publish videos on social media, we publish warnings. Other banks have messages that go around to explain to the people, look, protect yourself, do not share these informations, be aware of these things. And it also, again, needs to be coordinated with the authorities. And I may step to the Middle East. One of my expert banks, I worked there, they went big time into cooperation with the police, with the cybercrime police and the government. And literally, there were seasons when every second bridge had a big banner saying, don't share your OTP, be careful of fraudsters, be careful of this, be careful. It's like, you have to spend time, you have to spend effort into it, and then it will work. And the other thing is, you need a good social media team that watches the social media for signals. Is there any kind of naming of yours? You can engage even companies that provide services to check for your name, whether it appears either in the dark web or in the social media related to frauds, to scams, where your details are kind of like shared. And I tell one example, a competitor bank of us, cannot say who, their name was in the social in the dark web for they're easily to use for money muling because their accounts are easily opened. They don't do this check. And like what Pat said, the fraudsters took that and went for it. And that's where you have to be. This is a chicken and egg game. We have to be kind of like seeing who's who,
Yeah. So coming to another question, what is the role of technology? How can technology help? And Julia, if I may ask for your views on that. Does technology have a solution? What more might be required?
I think that in the new world of technology and also with the speed of payment, in the good old days when you need 2 days to transfer money, now you need only a split second. You definitely need technology to be able to help you to fight financial crime. But having said that, I would say that I know that there are a lot of vendors out there that are talking about powered by generative AI, and all that. I personally do not see generative AI to have the capability to be fully effective in detecting money mule. I'll just give a very personal example of mine is I have a team that they have identified some triggers, alerts that came in from the system. Then, as Torsten mentioned, curiosity is important. So one of the guys, he just went, I wonder, whether this particular individual is connected to that individual, because I'm seeing his phone number appearing on the other description. And, lo and behold, just because of someone asking that question, I wonder, we identified a group of people actually doing transferring of funds within the ecosystem. And, it came as a group of 5 individuals at one shot that we identified. So these are some of the things that while AI would be able to speed up the identification, machines will still need to be taught, with past experience. And so that's where it has to be a balance of both machine, not fully relying on machine. We still need to train our guys, our people, to be able to identify this and encourage them to have that curiosity.
Right. What about you, Pat, on the government side, how is technology helping?
Yes, technology is vital. Within the FIU network globally, a software package called GoAML, which is provided by the United Nations, is very, very beneficial to us. But other methods are also important. But technology is vital for all of us. But I think also the human is still very, very important. And human eyes are important to look at your STRs or SARs that you send into us, because the machine doesn't pick up everything. I would like to think that the human will never be replaced in this area by the machine, because curiosity is very, very important. Some of the challenges I think that face all of you in the banking sector going forward into the next few years is the effectiveness of your system. And this is what will be tested in the new Financial Action Task Force review for any of you that come under those reviews. 2 days later, spotting the Mule account, in my opinion, is absolutely of no value, because the money has been taken from the victim and has been moved through the Mule account, is now under the control of the organized crime group. So technology within your systems is important, but technology within law enforcement is also important, because there's no point in one police force doing a really good job in one part of Europe if the other police forces don't work on the same factors. So a challenge for law enforcement, I think, is what is a money mule? Are they victims themselves? And some law enforcement agencies and banks take the attitude, or adopt the attitude, that all, if not most, of money mules are victims. I would not agree with that. I think there are cases where money mules become victims or are victims and transformed into mules, but the majority are aware that they're committing wrongdoing. And one thing that needs to be done is the awareness. But second, if people ignore the awareness from the banking sector and from law enforcement, they do need to be prosecuted. They do need to be arrested. They do need to be brought before the court and send a message to them that this is wrong. If you were laundering money for a drugs and organized crime group, you would definitely be charged very quickly. But we adopt a slightly softer attitude, I think, over the years to financial crime. And therefore, these money mules in some countries get off very easily. So I think that is a challenge for law enforcement and for all of us investigators. We need to be pursuing them. So we've also in Ireland set up a forensic financial services liaison office with the banking sector. So when the bank has 1,000 cases, where do they report them? To report them in 1,000 different police stations in Cambodia or Singapore would be crazy. So what we've done in Ireland is we've started to take those complaints in block from the banking sectors. And that's working quite well, because we get a really good picture then of what has happened with this organized crime group in the month of August or the month of September. So that's at its early stages, but we really see the benefits of taking the complaints in bulk from the banks. It makes the banking sector more efficient as well. They can package it for us and they can let us know what they're thinking as. So going back to what Julia said, the curiosity then becomes a file. The file goes to law enforcement and it makes it easier for them to investigate and follow it up from a law enforcement point of view. The last thing I would say in relation to technology is, the criminals are watching the technology advances as well. So we're seeing more moves into the gambling world, into the gaming sites. So you need to be aware of that as well. We have seen a dramatic move away from our domestic banks to the online banking and to the e-money providers. And I'm sure you're seeing the same. But as the challenges in those areas are shut off for the criminal, or the openings are shut off for the criminal, they'll move to other areas.
Thank you. My next question actually was going to be around, what initiatives, public-private initiatives are being set up in various countries. In fact, you already touched upon what you're doing in Ireland. Coming to Julia, what are you seeing in Singapore? What has been put in place, to create a more robust defense against money mule activities?
I think so far we haven't really specifically target money mules, but more from a fraud and scam perspective, yes, because there's the anti-scam centers and that has been set up. I think it's not just in Singapore but across the world. There are a lot of countries that have done so. So you don't really look at money mule as and fighting money mule as an activity on its own, but look at it as there's always a crime behind the crime of money laundering. And what I believe a lot of the authorities are doing is actually trying to fight the crime that is behind the need to launder money and the need to have money mules.
Sure, thank you. Hari, what about in India? Can you bring our audience to speed on what's happening in India on this?
So there are different initiatives that are taken by the Apex Bank RBI. So if we see even for the KYC part, like recently RBI has introduced certain guidelines where the video KYC is introduced, as Torsten also touched this earlier, where the KYC of the person is taken through a live auditor check and through taking his ID proofs, and also liveliness check is done, the IPs are captured, etc. So this makes sure that the customer or the person is identified and all his liveliness checks are done, so that it creates kind of trust for that process, right? Still the money mule accounts are being used, but there are different ways and means, as Julia also mentioned, that we need to have a risk-based approach. We can have a risk categorization for the customers. There is a central KYC repository that the RBI has formulated, where the customer KYC details are stored in that central KYC repository. So that reduces kind of or mitigates that fraudulent activity. There are certain, we have recently started tokenization. So card on file tokenization or tokenization service, where instead of the actual card details, it is encrypted and shared as a token, so that that fraudulent transactions can be avoided. So these are the various steps that government agencies as well as financial institutions are taking. They are trying to upgrade the fraud risk monitoring tools, or using a real-time database access monitoring tool, so that sudden surge in transactions, certain suspicious behavior can be tracked or monitored to mitigate the risk. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. And if I may also, we can hear from Torsten on what's happening in Cambodia, and then maybe move to some questions from the audience.
In Cambodia, we have pretty much like what the previous speaker said. Technology is a matter. As I said earlier, you need to have good technology, good platforms, the curiosity, they all need to work together. The training, as what was said. And then the other thing is, you might have to decelerate transactions and experience for the customer. So blocking is a toxic topic, but sometimes if you see high transfer patterns, quick, you might want to slow down the customer via a call center callback and ask. That kind of is the disruption that you need to create. So that's a practical idea, if you don't want to go for blocking right away.
Right. Thank you. I see a lot of questions. So let's move to some of the questions from the audience. There's one that I found which is quite basic, and it's from Henry. They ask, what are the key reasons behind the rise in money mule activity in recent years, and why have fraudsters increasingly turned to this method for money laundering? Julia, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I'll give a step. I'll start. I think the rest will have a lot to talk about this as well. Look, I think especially during COVID, you have seen a rise in people losing their jobs. I'm not saying that all these people are bad in nature, but sometimes when there's a need for money, this is very, very tempting. If I have I need $50 to take my kid to the doctor, and if someone is offering $100 for me to use my account for them to do something with it, which I Do you think I would take it? There's a high chance that anyone who is in that kind of situation would take it. And, and jobs are scarce, hard to come by. And with technology, there's even greater opportunity. So I would see this as not going to come down. The volume will not come down, it will increase.
Right. Would any of the panelists like to add to that?
Yeah, if I may add, there's also a fault on our side, bankings, fintechs. A lot of the fintechs that came up for payment service processing, for e-money, they were cutting corners on compliance. They were cutting corners on fraud. They wanted to create the most smooth customer experience, and by that cutting away all controls, make it easy, don't ask. I know fintechs that instead of asking for the source of fund or the purpose of fund, auto populate the field with private or other. Don't ask for documents. And the fraudsters, as Pat was saying, they observe the market very well. They see those entities in the market that are the easy entry. They are the ones they especially attack. And I see now more and more banks and fintechs are turning the corner and become good again. But there was a door open, and that door has been exploited. And as Julia said, during the COVID crisis, especially in Southeast Asia, people lost jobs. And as I said at the beginning of my remarks, at the beginning of this call, $50 is in some countries a lot of money. And if you think you have 6-7 banks and the guy opens 6-7 fake accounts and gives them to the money launderer, then here you go. There was a door open, there was a need. All the 3 criteria for fraud were given.
Right. Thank you. There's one question on the whole measurability of efforts that are being taken. Have you measured the effectivity of education or information dissemination? And are there any stats, and how do they look like? And Pat, do you have anything on this? I mean, has there been any effort on this?
Yes, I think I said already that the minute we carry out a Money Mule Awareness Day and the effect it can have on you, on your travel capabilities if you're arrested and convicted, because it carries a conviction which is related to money laundering and terrorist financing under our legislation. It definitely has a major effect on the criminals. But if I might step further into the criminal networks that we've seen, they will chat to each other saying, we need more accounts, we're struggling to get accounts. But we've also seen some work we've carried out in Ireland whereby we've targeted money mules, and they've specifically come out publicly between themselves and said, we need to consider moving to another European country where the rules are not as strong, where the law enforcement is not carrying out as much activity. So they will move from country to country and from bank to bank. And I think as Thorsten said, there have been a lot of weaknesses in some of the fintechs, and they will spot that straight away. Another thing we have identified, Arpita, is the insider threat within all of the financial entities, probably not just in Ireland, but globally. So these organized crime groups will either embed somebody in your organization or will contact somebody within your organization and offer them a lucrative deal. So therefore, some new technology that you're going to implement within your financial sector or your entity, the criminals on the outside will be aware of this just in advance of what you're going to do. So that is a big challenge for you to identify them working with inside your network. And that's not just a banking network. They're working in the social media platforms. They're working in a lot of our shops, in our hotels. So they are gathering data all the time for the criminal networks. The other thing I think that is very important is how do we deal with mules? And how does the bank take that step forward to do something about it? So the Banking Payments Federation Ireland is the overall body that would look after the banking sector. So they would have their own fraud smart arena, and they would carry out a lot of awareness training, awareness days as well. So it takes the onus off the individual bank, as some of the speakers were saying earlier. In other words, I'm not taking the first step forward. It's the banking network that's taking the first step forward. So that's another way around it. And the other thing I would say in relation to the increase in money mule activity, which was our first question, You know, the mule is the lifeblood. They cannot get the money out of the system without some type of a mule account. Whether the mule is obtained through a romance scam, through a pig butchering, or any other method, the mule is needed. The mule account is needed because they are not going to use their own bank account. They need a mule account.
Right. Thank you. Any more comments, or we'll move to the next question? Okay. So there's one question in chat around, identification through transaction monitoring is an important tool. But how can such accounts be identified at the time of onboarding? And I think, Torsten, you spoke about it, but it would be great if you can, elaborate a little bit more for the person who's asked the question.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Ideally, we all would have a crystal ball, and we can look into that crystal ball, and it says, yep. That crystal ball doesn't exist, but experience, historical data helps, and you can see the patterns, and you can talk to your law enforcement authorities to understand the patterns. Like Hari was explaining that mostly young people in India are involved in this. Here in Cambodia, it's not a secret, the pattern is usually middle-aged male countryside open accounts. So once you have this pattern and the information, then you can already classify them in a higher risk bucket than if you have other categories. It's very difficult because the fraudsters learn, so they distribute the patterns. So they're not going anymore to bring, 5 years ago, they would have brought 10 farmers into a branch. The 10 farmers would have opened in the branch, and your onboarding detection would have been, okay, I got 10 farmers that opened each an account within 1 hour. That's an alarm. But that doesn't work anymore because now they have the instant accounts, the e-accounts. So you need to really look at your onboarding patterns. You need to retrieve backwards to the transactions. Detecting at onboarding is difficult. The best is really still onboarding plus real-time monitoring of the transactions. And the moment you have a burst of activity in an account or a network activity in your accounts, snap and at least decelerate, if not break the chain. Breaking the chain, as Julie said, is challenging because customers go quickly to the authorities or to the social media in case you got the wrong ones.
Right. Hari, anything else from the fintech side that you've done or you would want to add?
So yeah, as Torsten mentioned, during the onboarding, we can have a dedupe check done, or if there are certain accounts which we find with similar names or similar addresses with minor differences, just to check whether these are money mule accounts that are opened, or it could be that we can use certain advanced methods through which we can try and identify during onboarding, like if they are already blacklisted accounts, we can do a scrub through the sanction list, or any other real-time checks that can be done to check the past history or behavioral patterns if they're already engaged into some earlier activities of crime or fraudulent activities, and then we can maybe double check or do an enhanced due diligence for that customers just to check if they are proper accounts.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Julia.
I think I wanted to also add one point, which was an observation, very recent one, is that perhaps with the fintechs, it's a bit more difficult to identify certain vulnerabilities of the customers that could potentially be needing assistance in operating their accounts. For example, if they are hearing impaired, or they are sight impaired, or they could be elderly, or and in general, this is a group of vulnerable customers. If you are able to identify, it's definitely worth the thought of having some enhanced monitoring to see that they have not been exploited.
Right. Just to add to what Julia said, there is also a model of banking correspondents or business correspondents where the customers can approach directly and open a standard due diligence account and do money transfers. So there are high chances that money mules can be utilized through this channel. So the banking correspondent touch points or the customer retail touch point should also have a proper due diligence in place so that this activity can be minimized at a certain extent. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. There's one question around social engineering. How is it different to money mules? And is the legal treatment to victims of social engineering the same as in the case of money mules? Pat, do you have an answer to this?
Yes, social engineering is vital. Probably not as effective, I think, in the money mule area as it is against the victims of fraud. We would have seen a lot of social engineering in relation to the victims and the targeting and the re-victimization of fraud victims. So I don't think social engineering itself is as important in locating the money mules. Historically, what we saw the money mules being gathered through was through college bars, college networks, social media advertisements, rather than social engineering directly. Now, I think the difficulty for the organized crime groups is everybody's at home. There is a certain awareness of the money mules. And that's why I think we have seen the transportation of money mules from one country physically to another country to open up legitimate accounts. And I think, as Thorsten said, we had people flown into Ireland from a number of different European countries to open money mule accounts. No matter how good your onboarding is there, you will not spot that, because it looks like 10 students have arrived from another European country to Ireland to go to college. Very, very difficult to identify that. So their flights were paid, their accommodation was paid, and I'm sure that's happening across the globe. So I think the whole idea is to slow down the process and to block the money, to block the movement of the money. I think we need to be doing a little bit more social engineering on the financial side and the law enforcement side rather than the criminals. So hopefully that answers your question in some way. But I would say the money mule is still their number one. And when we look at the structure of the organized crime group, even that the money mule is bottom of the pile and gets paid the least amount of money or gets the least out of the transaction, they carry all of the risk at that level. Now, what we have seen is by targeting the money mule, you can identify the people up along the chain, and we've succeeded in identifying the gang leaders both within Ireland and globally. And working with Interpol in particular, in Operation Jackal, which has become a global operation, a lot of good work has been carried out there. So I would like to highlight Operation Jackal from an Interpol point of view, but also in the last 2 days, Europol issued a financial crime report, which is really well worth looking at. I haven't read it, but I know the detail that's within it is very important for all of you. It's well worth looking at, and I've seen some of the financial crime commentators on LinkedIn in particular commenting on it and how beneficial it would be. So it's a Europol report, and I know it's aimed at Europe, but there's a lot of global content in it as well.
Right.
Yeah, just to add, just
sorry.
just one moment. So I agree with Pat, and a lot of is being done at the various law enforcement agencies level. But still, what I think is that there is a lot being done at Asia level, or maybe as Pat mentioned in Ireland and different countries on various country level, right? So if there is some consortium or some collaboration between all these law enforcement agencies, which I think there is a FIO&D which is region wise, etc. But this data, if can be circulated real time to kind of mitigate or kind of monitor this kind of money mule transactions or behaviors, that would also add as a additional layer to kind of try and control this activities, if not completely.
Right. There's one more question, very related question on YouTube actually. It says, is it possible to develop a global blacklist database on people engaging in money mule activities? What is the possibility of having such a database? Have you seen anything being done? Pat, have you seen anything?
Yeah, a global blacklist is a great idea, but the problem is they always need new mule accounts. So it won't exactly stop the money mule activity, because They will use Arpita's account today. Once that account is blown and has been spotted by a bank, that's the last time they'll use her account, more than likely. The same with my account. So a blacklist for the Money Mule accounts really is not going to work unless we can identify them at opening point. And I think the general feeling from within your sector is that you can't identify them at opening, because if you did, you'd stop them at that point. So a blacklist itself will probably not be of great benefit. What is important is if we can identify a Money Mule account that is being used, to notify the country that it's being used and very quickly to shut the account down. And that can be done through the IBAN network. I think we need to do more in the banking sector about how to share that information. We can't rely on FIUs to do it, because it will bury them with transactions and paperwork. So I think there is a need that if a bank in Singapore identifies a bank in Ireland that's being used as a money account, that they will notify that bank. I'm not sure if there's a system there for doing that at the moment.
Right. Thank you. Lots of work to be done. Clearly, we have too many questions. I don't think we will be able to take them today. We're almost out of time. So I must thank all of you, Julia, Torsten, Pat, Hari. Thank you for this fantastic discussion. And thanks so much to our engaged attendees. Hopefully you've learned something new. It was a good use of your time. Just one very quick announcement about Fintelect's upcoming programs. One is our AML-CTF annual summit in Manila, Philippines, which is coming up on October 3rd. We will have the keynote from the AMLC ED, Attorney Matthew, as well as speakers from the BSP and the SEC, among others. This is information for our attendees joining from the Philippines. We've put a link to the agenda in the chat box. We also have the next batch of our AML compliance certification program, which is the FCAP, which is coming up on October 26th and 27th in Bangkok. Again, you'll find more information on our website, and there's a link being shared as well. And once again, a reminder, all of those attending today on Zoom will automatically receive the participation certificate within the next week. But those tuned on YouTube, please send us an email on support@fintech.com to request your certificate. Once again, thank you so much, all of you, for joining, and wish you a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
you.
everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day.
Thank you,
Stay
Arpita.
safe.
Thanks, Fintelekt. Yeah. Thank you all.